What up, guys? Bench Buddies are back with our third conference breakdown, the Big 12, and I think this is the one where I'll use the analogy. You got an accordion, they're all jumbled together, and it's never going to expand because this conference is just all meshed into one. Now, there's going to be two teams at the end, obviously playing for a conference championship, but you'll find that out here. As always, I got Ty joining me here, doing his Big 12, and let's just say we're not getting off to a hot start. I'm being more generous with Arizona than Ty's going to be. They might lose that Hawaii game after Hawaii just beat Stanford. I mean, I might just throw that out there. Hawaii looks better than they have in years past. But Arizona, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe beat a team or two in Big 12 play. But after that, I really don't see too much wins there. They do return almost half of their production from last year, but when your production was 4-8, I don't really know how good that's going to be. They didn't recruit well out of 100 36 teams. You're right in the middle of the pack there, so it doesn't really bode well for this Arizona team this year.
No, I mean, I'm really high on Jed Fish as a head coach, so I think you're going to see that with him leaving Arizona. You already saw it last year with them going 4-8, but now, like you said, not being able to recruit well, coming off of that season, I just think it's going to get even worse this year before it gets any better. And, they drew a pretty tough schedule in the Big 12. They don't get UCF, they don't get West Virginia. I think those are the only two teams they could possibly beat this year in conference. So not getting either of them, I think it's a long year and it's 2-10.
In the other side of Arizona, you get the Sun Devils, and we're both high on this team. I have them going to the conference championship there, as you can see with the little asterisks there. Their only losses are to Texas Tech at home and Iowa State on the road. But other than that, I don't really see too much problem. I guess the Utah game and at Colorado late in the year are the two other games I could possibly see them losing. But this Arizona State team, obviously, they're coming off of a conference championship, coming off of a playoff berth. But the only thing that scares me is Cam Skattebo. Obviously, he's gone, and he was the offense last year. Let's just be honest. I get you returning 17 starters, which I think is the most in FBS this year. So obviously, they do have a lot there. And Kenny Dillingham, obviously, is a great coach. What he's done so far at Arizona State can really kind of turn this program around for the better for the foreseeable future. And I think if there is a team to really break out of that accordion reference, I think it would be Arizona State yet again.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are expecting them to take a step back this year without Scattaboo, but like you said, 17 returning starters, and I think Sam Levitt might be the most underrated quarterback in the country this year, just because of how good Scattaboo was. They didn't have to rely on him too much last year. He might be a top five quarterback though going into this season. He's NFL level talent, and I think that'll show this year. The offense might look a little different, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look worse. So I have them going 10-2 this year. The way it shook out for me, they were losing out on tiebreakers for making it to the Big 12 championship. But if they could get Utah or Iowa State on the road, they'll be right in the mix to be back in the championship game.
And moving to Baylor, I think this team 6-6 is a perfect record for this team. Um, if they can somehow beat Auburn, though, then I think that is kind of flip the switch there, and I wouldn't be shocked if this team finishes 8-4. But that I think that's the best game of week one that isn't Texas Ohio State is this Baylor Auburn game because you got two teams that are right in the middle of each conference. Obviously, we're going to preview that game here later this week, but that's the game that I would be watching if you want to find out how good these conferences are going to be this year because those two teams are right in the middle and they're going to kind of swing the pendulum one way if it's going to be a good conference, top heavy, or if it's going to be kind of just two teams and then everybody else is just jumbled in there. But for the record wise, I don't really see them going on the road and beating too many teams, except that SMU game early in the year. I think they can possibly steal one from SMU early because they're still trying to figure things out after their playoff run last year. But Baylor 6-6, I think with what they've had in recent years, I think they would take another bowl game appearance.
Yeah, this is a crazy schedule here. Playing back-to-back Power Four teams on the road to open the season. They get 11 Power Four opponents on their schedule in six road games. So really didn't do themselves a lot of favors there. They get Arizona State, Kansas State, and Utah all in conference, who are the consensus top three teams going into this season. So I think the schedule, more than anything else, is why I have them at 6-6. I have them starting 0-2. If either of those games were at home, I think they could both go the other way. Unfortunately, they're not. And I think there's a chance they could get one of those big three at home. I just don't quite see it this year. So a lot of people are high on Baylor as a sleeper in the Big 12. I just think with the schedule, not quite enough returning talent. I don't quite see it. So 6-6 is what I'm going with.
And BYU, I think, is another team that could go either way. Obviously, last year just missed out on the playoff, and this team was a very good team until those last three games of the year where it just all fell apart. I can kind of see them getting off to an easy start. Obviously, if they don't start 3-0, I think there's trouble out there in Utah. Um, but that Colorado game looms large. I think that's when we're really going to find out who this BYU team is because obviously by then we're going to kind of know which team is kind of more reliable than we can depend on. Obviously, they just today named Caden Salter the head quarterback there in Colorado. So who knows what's going to go on there for BYU, but their schedule at home is very favorable. Besides that Utah game, I really don't see them losing a home game unless maybe they do suffer at the end of UCF like I have. But BYU, I think, is that team that could somehow, some way throw their hat in the ring with a week or two left in the Big 12 to get into that conference championship.
Yeah, I think they had a chance to be in the mix, but losing Brady Retzlaff so close to the start of the season was a big blow for BYU. Obviously, we won't get too far into what was going on there, but at certain schools, what he did would not have been dismissible. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
But that's what happened. And this team, they do get a pretty favorable schedule to start the year. I think that Colorado game is almost a toss up. If they can win that, they should be 6-0 welcoming their arch rival to their home stadium. So that could be a lot of hype. I just, I don't think they get the Colorado win. I don't quite see them beating their rival at home, even though they have in years past. And then I think the wheels kind of fall off in the second half of the season. So I think 7-5 this year, and hopefully they get a little more stability at the quarterback position moving forward.
Yeah, and Cincinnati, ever since Luke Fickell's been gone, yet another 5-7 season is what I predict. I have them losing to that Nebraska team. And they're going to be good this year. And then you look at those road games at Utah and at Kansas, obviously early in the season and then later in the season, those two teams are going to be pretty much playing their best football. And then you're home against Iowa State, which I do have them pulling off an
One
upset
off and upset.
against Iowa State there. And other than that, Arizona, BYU, like I said, both teams that I think are going to be kind of in the bottom of the conference. So I think they will get those wins just because they're at home.
Yeah, I feel like the Luke Fickle move really just worked out as poorly as possible for both parties involved because Wisconsin obviously hasn't really done anything, and Cincinnati has just been completely irrelevant in the 2 years since he left. I think it's more of the same this year. Just, not enough NIL funding, not good enough recruiting as of now to compete in the Big 12. They're going to have to get something up, whether it's throwing more money around, something, but they're going to have to recruit better to compete in this conference, and it's been showing. I think it will again this year. I think the Nebraska game is going to be tough to open the year. Nebraska, obviously, we're both expecting big things out of going into this season, so I think 5-7 is about as good as it can really get this year for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and everyone wants to talk about a wild card team. I think this is your team in the Big 12. Not too many people are too high on them because obviously they lost the Heisman winner, Heisman runner-up, um, and also, the coach's son. I mean, to name a few that pretty much kept this team afloat, and that's why they got to 8-4 last year, and then 9-4 won a bowl game. But I think they do take a minor step back. I think that Georgia Tech game, if they can win that game at home. I mean, if you were to take the same teams and this was 2024's team, I'd probably pick Colorado to beat Georgia Tech. But it's a new look Colorado team. Like I said, Kane Salter is now the quarterback for this Colorado team. I think the Georgia Tech game is going to be tough for them in the fourth quarter. So I like Georgia Tech there. But after that, I can see them getting on a roll, 4-1, heading into TCU. And I mean, they might win that game, but I'm just not convinced yet until I see this team play competitive football games in conference, and picking a road win for them there. So they're only three wins in conference are going to be at home against BYU, at home against an awful Arizona, and on the road against an awful West Virginia. Now, I wouldn't be surprised though if they do pull off an upset against one of those teams there that I do have them losing in conference.
Yeah, I agree that they could go two very different directions this year. We both have them 6-6, but I could see 9-3. I could even see 3-9 after losing what they lost last year. But I think Salter is a big addition to at least keep a little bit of stability at quarterback. The schedule is just doing them no favors this year. They also get the big three in the conference, but they get two of them on the road. I have them losing to all three. So I think that's going to be tough. And I have them dropping the Georgia Tech game. I've gone back and forth on that one, but we both expect big things out of Georgia Tech this year. So I think they dropped that one at home. And then, yeah, 6-6. I'm not sure if that will, I think Colorado will still be bought in, Dion, if 6-6 is the result this year. But there might be a few question marks. Can he only get it done when he has two Heisman contenders? So I think we'll see how it plays out this season for them.
Yeah, and I don't think there's really much to talk about here for Houston. You kind of, I'll let you have the ball this one because I don't really see him doing too much this year. So the floor is yours here for your 8-4.
Yeah, I guess Houston's my surprise team in the Big 12. I do think, I know I bring it up with every team. The schedule helps them a lot as well. I mean, you got Stephen F. Austin, Rice, and Oregon State for non-conference. That's pretty easy non-conference schedule. They get West Virginia, Arizona, and UCF in conference, the bottom three teams, according to most people. And they have Willie Fritz, a head coach, who I think is very underrated, who led Tulane Tulane of all teams to a New Year's Six Bowl victory over USC. So I think he's going to bring some stability to this program. They already are starting to recruit at a Big 12 level, something Cincinnati hasn't been able to figure out yet. So I think you match the schedule together with a elite head coach and some underrated talent. I think this team could surprise a lot of people with an 8-4 record.
And then Iowa State obviously is my other team in the conference championship. And at 9-3, you might be thinking, how did they get there? Well, they only had two conference losses, tiebreakers as well for me. That game against Iowa, obviously I have them losing because it seems like, well, he just can't figure that one out. At least he can figure out Farmageddon, Matt Campbell, that is. Obviously I'm 1-0 there, and you're obviously 0-1 in that one. But Iowa State, it just seems like they were sloppy in the first half, but figured it out in the second half and made plays when it mattered. And I mean, either team, don't overlook the result of week one or week zero, technically. But I don't know. Iowa State just seems like they just kind of picked up right where they left off last year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that might have been their toughest game of the season, honestly, and they got out of it with a win. So if you're an Iowa State fan, don't even worry about how sloppy the first three quarters of that game were. Just be happy to get out of that with a win because, I mean, going down the line here, I have them at this point now being 8-1 going into that TCU game, and even at Colorado as a game they definitely could win. So, I don't see a ton of losses here moving forward. And, with so much stability at head coach, Matt Campbell has done an unbelievable job leading this program. They have not really recruited well in any year under him, but they continue to just churn out wins every year. I believe last year was their first 11-win season ever as a program, which is kind of crazy. And I think you'll see more of the same this year with how it started.
Yeah, the moving to Kansas, I think this is my team that, due to tiebreakers, unfortunately does not make the Big 12 championship game. But I was saying last week, take the 12.5 on Fresno State. I think it's going to be a close game. Man, was I wrong. But can we get a healthy Jalen Daniels for 12 games? That's the biggest question mark heading into this year. If we do, which you and me, I'm assuming, are both projecting to happen, we don't really see them losing the games they should lose, or losing the games they should win, and winning the games that they have to win to even stay afloat in this conference. Now, the six returning starters is the big wild card for me in this one because if you want a healthy quarterback that, already isn't healthy and just seemingly can't figure it out how to stay on the field, um, having key pieces around him that have been there and done it before also helps that team or whoever's coming in. But I don't know. Kansas, I think, is that team that they got the new stadium. They already won in week zero. The team's buzzing. Everybody's on fire. But that Missouri game in week two, if they can somehow go into Missouri, win that game before they start conference play, I think you and me are both going to be like, yeah, I think this Kansas team can probably win the Big 12. Because if you look at that schedule, like you're going to mention, Texas Tech, Kansas State, and then Iowa State, Utah at the end of the year, we might see a rematch if Kansas can run the table.
Yeah, similar to Nebraska. We said they were, I think we said 1-6 in one score games, Nebraska was. And if you just flip the script, they're 9-3 or 10-2. Well, it's even worse with Kansas. They started, I believe, 2-7 last year, 2-6, and almost every single one of those games was a one score game. And being 2-6, obviously they didn't win a lot of those one score games. So this team, I think, was way better than their record showed, and they ended up coming up with some big wins at the end of the year, including kind of dominating Colorado, who was in the college football playoff mix there at the end of the season. So I think if they can build off that momentum at the end of the season and come out on the winning side of some of these one score games, you'll see a big improvement this year. So I have them going 8-4, but could even see them, outperforming that a little bit.
And then talk about their rival, Kansas State. Now, like I said, I got them losing Iowa State, which they did, but I think it's still on the table for them to even run the table because look at that schedule. At Kansas, at Utah are your two toughest games left on your schedule. If you can go 1-1 and win out, which obviously I don't have them doing, they're going to finish 10-2 and have a legitimate chance to get to the Big 12 championship, make a playoff run. Now, it's totally doable. I don't think they really have a challenge until at Kansas, which is week, I think 10 that is. So why can't Kansas State kind of replicate the year they had last year? And I think there isn't really a good reason unless a lot of people get hurt.
Yeah, I think I also expected some improvement out of Avery Johnson this year. And remember, he won the job over Will Howard, a national championship, now NFL quarterback. He won the job, which is why Will Howard ended up at Ohio State. So I think that's why a lot of people have had big expectations for Johnson over last season and now going into this season. He still hasn't quite lived up to it and struggled a lot here in week 0 this year. So I guess I technically have them 9-3 now, coming off a week 0 loss. I still think Kansas is going to beat them at home. Kansas was right there in Manhattan last year, should have won the game, but that was one of the many one score games they lost. So I think Kansas State still loses on the road at Kansas and loses at Utah. So I guess now I have them finishing 9-3 because I just don't quite see it with Avery Johnson like I thought I would.
Yeah, and I think another team we're going to go talk about that unfortunately is going to be a little better than last year, surprisingly. A team that I think just is missing too much and is kind of reloading under Mike Gundy is Oklahoma State. I think 6-6 is very realistic for this team. Obviously, they're over-unders at 5.5, but if they get 6-6, I think this is a win and a step in the right direction and getting back to where they have been the last 3 or 4 years and being an 8-9 win football team. The four returning starters obviously is a key piece to why we don't really have them doing too much this year. But the out of conference schedule, I mean, at Oregon, I mean, I'm sorry that you scheduled that one at this point in the season. But everything else, I can see them winning at home. Besides, and I have them upsetting Kansas at Kansas in the surprise win because this team once a year, somehow, some way, just goes somewhere and just dominates a team. I don't know how they do it, but Mike Gundy just figures it
That
out
is true.
1 week, and it's just probably like the biggest upset of the year in the Big 12 every year. They figure it out. So I think that's going to be the Kansas game for me this year, and they're going to pull it off. But I don't know. I think like I said, 6-6, a bowl game berth is probably more than a lot of Oklahoma State fans are expecting this year.
This might be the real wild card of the conference. I think this was an even more difficult team to predict than Colorado because last year was just so crazy. A lot of people had Oklahoma State at 9 or 10 wins. If you had them winning the Big 12 going into last season, no one really would have batted an eye, and they won 3 games. So just an absolute nightmare of a season. 4 returning starters this year. But I hate to say it, that might not be a terrible thing when you only won 3 games in the prior season. So, like I said, tough team to predict because last year went so poorly. But Mike Gundy has been such a winner for this program, has taken them to heights they've never seen before. So I think they do bounce back enough to make a bowl game this year. But it's really hard to, predict them any higher than that with how last season went.
And TCU is exceeding expectations under Sonny Dykes last year. Now, I think they do take a major step back here. They recruited well, have almost half your team coming back, but at North Carolina, I just don't see a way that they win that game because, well, it's Bill Belichick's first game in college, prime time game. I mean, we already saw what happened when Colorado came, you went to Colorado in prime time and the hype was around that game and they lost that one. And I think since then they just really haven't been the same team. But I will give them credit. Somehow, some way finishing 9-3 in last year's Big 12 was a major success for them. Um, but you just look at that Big 12 schedule, a lot of on the road games against the better teams in the conference, and I just can't see them getting better than 5-7. The only wins I have pretty much are against the teams that are at the bottom besides Colorado.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a lot of people's dark horse as well. I've seen a lot of TCU being predicted and a lot of Baylor in the Big 12 as teams that are going to break out this year. But with TCU, I think a lot of people are still really high on Sonny Dykes from when he took this team to a national championship back in 2022, which was, obviously a phenomenal accomplishment for TCU. But I just don't think they've quite capitalized on that momentum like people thought they would. And I think it's, 9-4 was still a solid season last year, but I think we, thought they'd be closer to the top of the college football world after being right there in 2022. So this year I have them 7-5, couple tough road games that I just don't quite see them winning. And I'm a little surprised they're favored in that week 1 game with North Carolina. I have them dropping that. So it's another 7-5 season, which, will be decent and keep Sonny Dykes around for another year.
And let's just talk about it. You got oil money here, Texas Tech. Everybody's been talking about it this offseason. Unlimited fund for players. And I can see why they're almost in the top 20 for a recruiting class. I wouldn't be shocked next year if they finish in the top 10 when it's all said and done. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because I think they can be a very good team. Their over-unders 8.5, one of the favorites to win the Big 12. And I think they're going to get the over, but just not make the Big 12 championship and miss out on the playoff by one game. And I think that one game is going to be the BYU game where they should win that game and they don't. But getting to that Kansas game, I think both those teams could be undefeated at that point in the season. And it could be a huge game to dictate how each of the team's seasons are going to go from there on out. And obviously, you have them going 10-2, so we're kind of in the same boat there. But at Utah, at Arizona State, at Kansas State, I have them winning two of the three. But I think realistically, if you can win one of the three and take care of business everywhere else, it's hard for me to not see this Texas Tech team make the playoff.
I think Texas Tech finally figures it out this year. It seems like every year people have them towards the top of the Big 12 thinking they're going to make their breakthrough. They haven't been able to do it yet, but I think they put themselves on the map by going to Rice Eccles Stadium in week 4 and beating Utah on the road, which is a very, very tough place to play. If they can get that win, I think a lot of people are going to start buying in again on Texas Tech. I do have them dropping the other 2 road games at Arizona State and at Kansas State. But I think finishing with UCF and West Virginia, that's a golden opportunity for them to get to the Big 12 championship, maybe the college football playoff, because those are probably, at the very least, 2 of the bottom 3, if not the bottom 2 teams in this conference. So I think this team should have high expectations, and I think they finally live up to them this season.
And a team that I am way higher on, I think this is probably the biggest one that we have out of all the Power Four. A lot of people talk about, well, he just needed to change his scenery and this and that with quarterbacks, running backs, any player really, right? Well, I think the same goes for coaches because this guy, Scott Frost, had great success here at UCF, left to go to Nebraska, obviously didn't work out, took a few years off, then he's back now at UCF, and I don't see why this team can't succeed in year one because I'm a big schedule guy like you are. At Cincinnati, West Virginia, Houston, Oklahoma State, BYU, um, and then your two out of conference schedules. I think they can win all those games or at least be competitive in those and go 7-5. Now the games they're losing are three of the five are on the road against, arguably the top four teams in the conference, and then you're out of conference of North Carolina at home. I don't know. I just got a feeling there's always one team. I know I said it with Oklahoma State, but there's a team that should be way worse than they are. And I think you're gonna not exceed expectations, but turn some heads this year. And I think that could be UCF. They go into 2026 on a positive note, thinking maybe the juice is back.
Well, I'm obviously going the other direction here with the Knights. I just think, Scott Frost took over an 0-12 program the first time he was at UCF, turned him around in 2 years to a 13-0 program. I think it's going to be a much slower progression now, being in the Big 12, much tougher to find wins than it was in the American back in 2016 when he took over the first time. So I think it's going to be a bit of a rude awakening. Not to say he won't be able to turn it around like he did before. I just think it's going to be much more difficult and much more of a process this time around. So I think it's a tough year one for him. Obviously 2-10, not a lot of positives to draw from that, but yeah, I just don't quite see him getting it done in the Big 12 this year.
And then Utah, I'm high on, you're high on, but I just don't see them going to their full potential this year because they've had no stability in the quarterback position the last 2 years. Obviously, the whole Cam Rising situation really put them behind the eight ball because he would play a few games, then get hurt with the lingering injury, and then he'd be fine for a week and then hurt it again. So they really never really had stability there. And I think that carry overs into this year a little bit. I know the games, their out of conference games are fairly easy there. I think they're going to smoke UCLA, which people don't really think, but that's just me. Their losses on my end, Texas Tech, Arizona State, and Kansas State all at home, which is kind of surprising for Utah for them to lose all those games at home because they're kind of like Washington where they don't really lose at home a lot. But you've turned those, one of those, two of them even, then I'm kind of in your boat there where I think this team could run the table and make the college football playoff.
Utah, I think, is just they have their best seasons when people expect the least out of them, and I think that's gonna be more of the same this year. Kyle Whittingham is an unbelievable coach. He might be the most underrated coach in college football. He's been, I want to say, 20 years running here at the helm at Utah, and it seems just every year they're in the hunt, and if they have a down year, they're right back in it the next year. So I think they continue that this year. I have them dropping the Texas Tech game at home, which I think will really um, wake them up, kind of turn things around the rest of the season. And after that, it's a pretty favorable schedule towards the end of the season. I think Kansas State at home, we just saw them drop that week 0 game. So I think they get that win. And it's all going to come down to the game in Lawrence in week 13. And I think they get out of there with a win. So I think Utah, yes, quarterback has been a bit of a question mark, but they brought in Devin Dampier, the transfer quarterback. I think that's going to pay dividends, and they're back at 11-1 this year.
And the team at the bottom of the conference, and saving them for last, is West Virginia. They're going to start 1-0, and then it's just a monstrosity after that. I think they're even going to lose to Ohio on the road. Like I said, I think they're the best team in the MAC, and going on the road to a MAC school when I think the school knows that they can probably get you because you're on a down year. Um, I don't like that for West Virginia. And the Pitt game, Pitt's one of the better teams in the ACC. Don't like that as well. And not to mention, you have a pretty tough schedule here. I mean, when your team's pretty bad. I think they're going to steal a game against TCU at home. But yeah, if there's any over under that I'm confident in, I would definitely take the under here for West Virginia.
Yeah, it's going to be a long year one, but I like the Rich Rodriguez hire. Obviously, us as Michigan fans, his philosophy didn't work for us, didn't work at Michigan. But outside of that, obviously, he had great success at West Virginia the first time around, was a winner at Arizona, really turned that program around, and then is coming off a lot of success over at Jacksonville State after they transferred up to the FBS level. So I think this year is going to be rough. Not a lot of talent that he's walking into, but I think he's going to turn things around at West Virginia like he did the first time. And although I think UCF is their only Big 12 win this year, I think West Virginia fans can still look forward to the future. And I'm glad they reunited.
That's going to be it for the Big 12 preseason overview. Check out our other conference predictions as you know the season's almost here. Then don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you're up to date with all of our videos. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.